Welcome. We are sitting down today with Andrea and Victor, and we're going to share a little bit about a story that happened in the life of our church and kind of how God showed up in that. And so, Andrea and Victor, thanks so much for taking the time out of your schedules to have discussion and share about what God has done. Can you just start off really by giving us an overview, some background of the events leading up to what happened, and kind of fill people in and bring them up to speed so they can understand these events and in the context of that?
Sure. So we are part of a prayer group, several of us couples, and we support one another through prayer, life events and illnesses and just all kinds of things. Have done this for several years, but it's typically just hey, sending out a text, please be praying for this, that, and the other. There have been times we've gotten together to pray, but typically it's just that kind of conversation. And so we were aware that David wasn't feeling well. We'd received a text from him March 18th and saying that he wasn't feeling well, and no specifics, just, he told us that he was sick, but we didn't have any concept of what was going on. So then we were praying all individually, and then very soon after that, the 26th, then we got the message from Michelle that he was going into the hospital. So then the 28th, which was that Saturday, I believe is when we heard the news. And not everyone had heard the news at that time, but because of our situation, we knew that. So we decided to meet at the hospital to pray. So there were only a couple of us that could go at that time because of proximity. Mm-hmm. And so the Browns and us met at the hospital to pray.
And it was really early on with the whole COVID. I don't think a whole lot was shut down yet and all that. So.
Right.
Well, we were home. We were home because that was the 16th.
Home, yeah.
Yes, but.
Right, so early on, so March of 2020, early in the pandemic, right away, one of our dear friends, pillar in the church, David, gets diagnosed with COVID and double pneumonia, or something like that. A combination of circumstances that put him in the ER or in the intensive care unit. And so we're all gathered. The church is responding in prayer, and you guys were some of the first ones to find out. So you and some other families in the church head to the ER to pray. And then, can you talk a little bit about, as details came out, how did you see the church as a whole? How did they respond? What did they do?
Wow. Well, there were a lot of people praying. Mm-hmm. It was amazing. The next step for us was some of our group mentioned, hey, let's FaceTime. We can't be there in person. We're feeling compelled to do this. And it was kind of ramping up at that time, April 1st being a very pivotal day for David. And at that point, that's where we really saw it was more open, more people were aware.
I think the Facebook post that Michelle was putting up there was starting up, late March.
Sure. Yeah, it exploded. It was all over Facebook. Once it took off on Facebook, that picture of David and Michelle was everywhere. It just said pray for David, and it was on everyone's wall. It got reshared. It got reshared so much that the quality of the image was degrading as it was shared, that you could tell how many times that it had been reshared. Yeah.
So it was just incredible the way the church was rallying, and this is even the big C church.
Big C church.
Yes,
definitely.
there were people that knew and had heard and were coming alongside to pray, and so it was amazing.
Yeah, during that time, I remember we had, of course, people were gathering outside their house on the streets to pray. These vans would pull up at the house, and just people kind of in the streets with their hands extended, families, kids with them. I remember we had people parking in the parking lot here at the church, and just all gathered and pulled in our cars. Looked like a drive-in movie kind of situation. Everybody was just hanging out to pray and praying for David, and kind of everybody knew that. There was signs out at Oak Hill on the fence out there, pray for Mr. Henry, all that stuff. So it was really cool, and we were all very aware of everybody participating in this thing. So then specifically though, you guys had some further prayer, events that were taking place with you and your group of friends. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Well, it started on the 28th. That's when he was intubated. So we were able to get in touch with Mike and Krista, say, hey, we're going to head to the hospital and just pray. I mean, we knew we couldn't go in, and we were going to go outside, but then it started raining, so we went to the parking garage.
Yes.
And yeah, all four of us prayed over David, and we took pictures of us there, and then
And
our
share them
friends-
with the group.
Yeah, our groups
Yeah.
saw that, and that's when they thought about,
Yeah.
hey,
Yes.
let's FaceTime or something, and take it from there.
Yeah, FaceTime or Zoom. So the very next day we set up a Zoom meeting with no idea of how it would evolve.
Right.
So, yeah.
So you're meeting on Zoom. How many people are meeting with you on Zoom to pray?
There were 4 of us, 5 of us couples, and it would vary. Usually most of us would be
Well, we
there.
set it up noon every day, so people
Yeah.
could take their lunch break, or if they were working from home or still working out. So
Monday through Friday.
Yeah,
We
Monday
did
through
Monday
Friday.
through Friday.
Okay. So it sounds like initially kind of impromptu was maybe like a one-off idea, like let's get together and pray. Because of the pandemic, we can't necessarily meet in person. During lunch, let's get together and Zoom tomorrow.
Yes.
And then that just kind of continued from there,
Mhm.
kept going. Was the structure kind of informal? Like how'd you decide who led when you got together? How'd you decide what to pray about? How much time to spend in prayer? Like how does that work when you just
Well,
get together to pray?
You know, definitely throughout the whole thing, I mean, a lot of it was just updates, you know, what have you heard from Michelle, you know, what have you seen? So we would kind of discuss that, so we kind of get a inkling of, you know, how to pray.
Mm.
And specific, you know, like one day was let him be able to get his fever down. Or,
Yeah.
And it all depended on what the day brought, so.
Yeah. That is, I mean, in retrospect now, especially, I think it's a beautiful image to be able to pray in the moment for the need, responding as the needs come in and say, okay, we're praying for sounds like a very specific thing, not just a general pray that he'll get better, though we're all
Right.
praying for that, but to be able to say, God, we're praying for this specific goal in mind. We would love for him to be able to get his fever down, or later we'd love for him to be able to stand up today, or so on and so forth, and being able to very specifically respond and to see God respond and do these things throughout the course of praying. Yeah.
The amazing part is that there were several times when we were together and we hadn't yet heard from Michelle, but knowing her as we did and knowing David, the Lord really just led us. And we even found out later from Michelle, after we had prayed for some very specific things that we felt led to pray for, she said, "Oh, those are exactly the things that we needed that day." So it was amazing to see him working through that. It was pretty neat to see.
I also remember thinking, we prayed specifically for Michelle and for for the family and for all the kids and just what they were having to go through. And that helped a lot.
Yeah.
And the doctors and the
Yeah.
nurses
Sure.
and
Sure.
all of these things.
What do you think as far as, I mean, we saw how God showed up and we know how he healed David. What about in that process of meeting regularly to pray, both you praying individually but also praying as a group, how did that, do you think, shape you spiritually during that time? Even as you're praying for another family, you're not praying for your own needs, you're praying for your brothers and sisters in Christ. How did that process, daily praying for those people, lifting those needs up, shape you and form you spiritually during that time?
You want to go first? You want me to
Go ahead.
This morning, as I was reviewing some of the timeline and just some of the things, I was overwhelmed, and I said, "Oh my word! I want to get through this with some modicum of decency, and not, totally." But it's really fine. I think what's amazing is just how people rallied, and being with. Part of it was we were all so. Maybe not worried, but there was fear there of what was going to happen. And we knew that coming together was the only thing to do. It was the only thing to do. And that going to our Father, who is capable of doing anything. He's capable of more than we can ask or imagine. And so we knew that coming together, the power that was there, and just storming those gates of heaven. together was the only thing to do at that point in time. And it revealed to me the power of community, how having these long-standing relationships, being real with one another, lifting one another in prayer, and how powerful that can be. So.
Absolutely. I remember during some of that period pleading with God in such a raw way, thinking of how Moses pleads with God in the Old Testament, and praying something to a similar effect when Moses prays that God don't abandon us, because what will separate us from any of these other people? And I remember thinking that and praying something to that effect for David, because we were so early in the pandemic and he got hit right away, and then kind of pleading with God, asking, Lord, because I thought he was going to die. I thought that was a very real, more than a real possibility.
Right.
And pleading with God in that raw sense, saying, God, what will distinguish us if this person dies? Where are you in this? Like, what will separate us from those who don't trust in you? And really pleading with God in a very, a raw, authentic way, and truly pleading, not something beyond just a casual prayer that you might do out of obligation or just habit, but meeting again that very real need in the moment.
Yeah, I remember praying. I don't know if it's the first time, but when I was praying it, I was praying as if, I don't know if it's bad to say, but I just knew that he could do it. And there was like no doubt when I prayed, especially that Wednesday when it was hard.
Yeah.
But I knew that he would, or he could. I didn't say, "Oh, you're going to do this." I just knew that if I prayed, that he was going to listen. And
yeah. And so, how long was this Zoom style meeting going on? How many days or weeks, or how was that happening?
We were pretty faithful Monday through Friday. After those first two initial days, for about 6 weeks. So throughout the process of his illness.
Okay.
Yeah.
And to come back to something, because I'm not sure if we said, to give you an idea, we're talking maybe 5, 6, 7 people on these calls.
Yeah, 7 or 8. Yeah, it would, and again, it would vary. It was funny because sometimes people would be out on a grocery run, but they would still connect in. It was
Sure.
it was pretty amazing.
And I know that there were lots of other people praying.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely.
I'm getting details from you guys as an example of
Yes.
one of the prayer groups that was meeting during this time, but I know there were many others in the
Yes.
church driving outside their house, praying physically there, praying in their regular Wednesday night meetings or wherever. So I'm just trying to get a sense of the different types of meetings that were gathering. So asking about how many people were involved and how long you did this. So in retrospect, spoiler, God answered prayer and
Sure did.
David is alive and well, and it's been amazing and remarkable, and his story's been told all over the place now. Now, I wonder, looking back on that experience, maybe consider the question, what did you know about prayer before you started, and now in retrospect after this experience, like how has your understanding of prayer shifted or grown, or what have you been taught, do you think, through that experience?
I think you mentioned like sometimes you just pray out of obligation, and it's probably not going to happen, so, but I'll pray it anyways. And like I said, you just pray like because He's God, He can do it, whether it just seems so far fetched at the time.
Yeah.
I spend a time in solitude and silence and praying alone and listening, and I sense His presence there, and this was different. This was a different type of praying, of asking, but He was just very kind to meet with all of us and to bring us together, and again, we were just one little microcosm of all of this larger thing that was happening that was so amazing. We knew that the Lord heard us, and it did transform us into, I mean, it deepened our faith, and it has certainly encouraged me to spend more time with him, even, and to encourage prayer in groups, and to take it maybe a little more seriously. You know, when I'm going to pray for you, I'm praying for you.
Yeah, that's definitely what I took away from that too.
Yeah, I was definitely struck by the unity of prayer. So everyone coming together to pray for a very singular focus, and to be united in purpose and cause, and not just merely, generally praying, but all of us united to come together for such a specific thing, to pray for a very specific thing, to expect a very specific thing, and to gather so purposefully for that one thing and pray accordingly was really, of course, really powerful throughout the whole experience. Yeah.
It seemed like a lot, like, oh my word, we're gonna. I mean, it could have seemed like a lot, like, oh, we're gonna pray again. But typically we were there about an hour together. And sometimes, there was maybe one or two times when we had only 15 minutes because people had other obligations or what have you. And so we would get in and get the job done and get out.
Yeah.
But it that wasn't a hindrance. It was something we looked forward to. Hey, it's noon. It's noon. We're meeting. Everybody's coming. We're going to be there. And we can't wait to see how God moves.
Yeah, that's great. So maybe shifting gears a little bit now, given that experience and generally what God has taught you about prayer, and no doubt all Christians have these moments of wondering, okay, I hear that testimony, I believe I'm supposed to pray, I believe God answers prayer, I believe this is a good thing, and yet I struggle to pray. I don't know what to pray. I don't know how to pray. For a variety of reasons, I think all Christians have been there. They know it's not just you. Everyone has come to a point like that. Whether it's from this experience specifically or just your experience in prayer in general, how would you answer that kind of wandering, that kind of, like, how do I do this? How do I spend time with God in prayer? What do I get out of that?
How do I do it?
Sure.
How do I do it? What did you say when we were talking about this earlier? You said
Just gotta first just do it. Just start doing it. I mean, because I know my prayer life has gotten better ever since then. So.
Yeah.
You just start. And it's
just having a conversation.
Yeah. And meet with someone. Everybody. Everybody has a first period of time where they're learning, and he's growing you through that. But connect with someone that has a rich prayer life, or that you feel has a rich prayer life, or maybe even not. Hey, how can we pray together? Let's be praying. There's so many resources out there to help with that. So yeah, I think it goes back to what you were saying. Just start. Just do it.
Yeah. One thing I've adjusted, not necessarily in response to this specifically, but it started at some point a couple of years ago, I think, maybe, when I pray for people or they text me they have a need, instead of responding with, yeah, I can pray for that, responding with a typed out prayer and really, instead of promising to pray later or whatever, just simply saying, absolutely, may the Lord grant you, wisdom and peace as you make these decisions. May the Lord, and just kind of typing that prayer and speaking it over them in the moment. And I found that to be helpful for me to be present and engaged right there. I'm not going to forget to pray for them. I'm not going to delay it. But also, it's been very real to that person as you speak those words over them and to them right then and there. It's like, wow, they're not just saying, hey, I'm praying for you, but rather, this is my prayer for you right here, right now, and really being real. When you think about, when you mentioned the just get started, just do it, I think to my exercise life, and if I had to, much like if you told me I have to sit down on Zoom every day for an hour for 6 weeks to pray for this person, I'm not going to do that.
Right.
I'm also not going to exercise an hour a day or whatever. But for me personally, I've gone through a phase where I said, I'm going to carve out 10 minutes
Sure.
to get on the bike, and I'm gonna go 10 minutes. And if I do that, I'm more likely to do it to begin with and
Sure.
get started. And then at the 10-minute mark, sometimes I'm like, oh, I can keep going. I've got a good momentum built here. I keep going. And I think people's experience with prayer or reading their Bible is similar. If they say, oh, I got to read the Bible this year, that goal is too heavy for them. But if they say, oh, I can carve out 3 minutes even to sit down and just read, and whatever you get done in that time, let that be, and spend that time with God, and start there. And then you might find that you actually cherish that time and value that time more as you go, for sure.
And he will lead you in that. I think the other thing too is accountability. Like, we knew everyone would be there.
And you don't want not
Yeah.
to be there.
And you didn't want to not be there.
And if they weren't there, you would know
Yeah.
who was missing and say, hey, where is
Right.
this person?
Or they would say, hey, we can't make it,
Yeah.
whatever. But yeah, we knew that.
Give me
And
10 minutes, I'll be there.
Right. But like, even now, like you also mentioned reading your Bible and praying, and we have found that accountability does that. Hey, if we're going to start a plan, let's start a plan together. Hey, how's it going? Checking in, that kind of thing. But yeah, sometimes it starts with just sit down and see how long you go,
Mm-hmm.
and then start to add another minute or add another whatever. But yeah, good thoughts, all of them.
That's great. That's great. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to share. And I know there's more stories that could be told about that time, and
Sure.
and maybe we'll have time to record those at some point in time and share more details about aspects of the story about what God has done. But certainly the takeaway is that God showed up in a powerful way. God not only answered prayers specifically for David in that situation, but through that, the community was grown, brought together. Our reliance on God increased. There's so many ways that all of us benefited, as we do in God's economy when we do what He's called us to do, surprisingly. And we all benefit. We all grow as a church, and it's been something that's brought us together, united us, and allowed us to see how faithful God has been. So thank you for sharing just a piece of that story of God's faithfulness and what He did during that time. So thanks so much, and thank you guys for joining us and listening in. I hope it's been a blessing to you, and you've been encouraged through that. And just as a church, then, I would like to remind us to pray with purpose, pray with intentionality, and come before the Father humbly yet boldly. We as a church we've seen the powerful things that God has done. We've seen Him answer prayer. We've seen His faithfulness. So how much more should we be willing then to come to the Father and pray boldly and humbly, but boldly come before the throne and share those requests with Him? And so as a church, let's continue to bring our requests to God the Father this week.